That is so funny that you mentioned the V-Girls. I was having a total flashback because I performed here with this collective I was in called the V-Girls in, like, I don't know, 1904. And I haven't come back to Berkeley since then. So it was really quite amazing to drive down these roads. And anyway, and the V-Girls was a sort of feminist academic slash critical theory group. We functioned as kind of guerrilla academics. So we would speak at academic conferences, and we were the keynote speakers at the MLA in 1990. But then the papers were like kind of feminist critiques of different topics. So when we performed at the MLA, there was basically a minor riot because people hadn't realized that we were going to be, you know, making fun of them, and then there we were. So thanks for helping us ring out this room. It is unbelievably hot, so please don't fall asleep. I'm going to yell periodically just to keep you awake. But also feel free to fan or, you know, step outside. I'm not going to be insulted. And I do want to thank Ken very much for bringing me here. It seems like a great series, and I wish we had something like this in New York, but we don't. So I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes, and then, read really for 10 minutes, and then show some videos and talk about three specific projects from the Builders Association. Ready? I actually wanted to start with a quote from, can you hear me? Is this really clear? Is up here? Okay. A quote from Vladimir Meyerhold from 1929. He says, "Give us the chance to work in a theater incorporating modern techniques and capable of meeting the demands of our conception of the theatrical spectacle, and we will stage productions which will attract just as many spectators as cinema." So as far back as the turn of the last century, we can observe the waning of live performance and the growing dominant form of cultural expression, cinema, and its grandchild, mass media. I've been thinking and teaching a lot lately about variety shows from the 1910s. Across Europe and the US, there was a moment where short films were billed primarily as diversions between the live performances, the live acts. But within a few short years, like by 1913, 1915, this gave way to the live acts being staged as filler between the films. In fact, the live bits came to be called coolers because they were used to kill time while the film projector cooled down between shorts. Even so, many of those early films were still simply shots of a play. The camera set in one fixed position, the film showing a scene from a well-known theatrical melodrama. So here's a telling inversion. Why did the audiences enjoy watching the film of the play more than the play itself? Tom Gunner and other scholars of early cinema would say that audiences were indulging in the entertaining spectacle of the technology itself. For instance, I'm sure you're all familiar with the apocryphal story about the Lumiere brothers' early film train arriving at La Ciotat, where purportedly the audiences ran from the theater in fear when they thought the train was barreling off the screen into the audience. But that can be said to really underestimate the sophistication of those audiences, and if they did run, it was more in the participatory spirit of an audience at Rocky Horror Picture Show than out of naive fear that the train was actually going to hit them. And we can take this further by saying that the audiences at that time watching these films of plays were on some level enjoying the continuum between these two media, the live and the pre-recorded, the familiar play and its defamiliarization, the play's regeneration through the spectacle of technology. And so I'm proposing today that at a live event, we are still playing along that spectrum of mediatization, and that our sense of liveness is still in flux, that destabilization is still being played out. And as this audience knows very well, our relationship to screens, whether they're computer, TV, or film screens, has extended into a kind of teleprosthetic relationship to the physical world. We've adjusted to a certain amount of constant mediatization. Whether you're deeply immersed in Second Life, simply streaming a live event, or even just experiencing multimedia performance, this sense of moving along the continuum of live and mediated experience is a constant. We're all trained to be smart viewers, seamlessly linking mediated life with live experience. And the pleasure of extending oneself into the virtual particular microcosm isn't to be underestimated. But I'm going to steer away from that discussion. I know there are other virtual and video game experts in the room, and back to staging liveness in the physical world as the substance of this talk tonight. Spectators watching significant portions of sports games, rock concerts, or evangelical sermons they attend on large LED screens, physically attending the event implies the experience of seeing a live show, even if you're a quarter of a mile away from the stage and watching the performance via a screen. By the way, how live are those shows? Almost all stadium performances are lip-synced and even carefully choreographed to reinforce each number, thereby eliding any possibility of spontaneity on the part of the performers. On the other hand, does the audience really want a spontaneous performance? Doesn't the majority of that audience come expecting to hear the songs performed in the way they know them from the recording of the cast album that they downloaded? As in early film, the mediatized performance takes precedence and becomes the source for the live one. The primary experience of liveness is really defined by the presence of other audience members, sharing and reinforcing the excitement of being in a specific audience. And of course, there's still the palpable aura of the live presence of the performer, unless you're watching, for instance, a Gorillaz concert, which, as I'm sure you know, features animated characters. By the way, did you know that the Gorillaz concert sold out in record time at the Apollo Theater in New York this spring, faster than any Broadway show? So theater, despite that, theater continues to be an interesting location to pursue this investigation, since through the presence primarily of the actors, it retains a vestigial association of liveness, but also has the potential for examining these definitions of what is live in a supposedly live format, all this in front of a live audience. So, as Shannon said, through the Builders Association's performances, the specificity as a live rather than mediatized event repeatedly calls itself into question. I'm very interested in setting up a kind of frictive relationship between the liveness of the performers and the liveness of the technology. And the stage becomes a kind of laboratory to view those interactions between human presence and electronic presence. I really think of these performances, I work in these performances to create a web of media around the performers, which they and the technical operators play in each show. And parenthetically, we just became the subject of a study called the Presence Project, which is a joint study between Stanford and Exeter University in the UK, where they're tracking several artists over the next 5 years to investigate basically the performance of present. And I know local superstar Ken Goldberg is also involved in that, so stay tuned. So the Builders Association is an eclectic group of theater artists. There are some very classically trained artists such as Jennifer Tipton, myself, some of the performers we work with, and then there's a large group of 3D animators and software designers as well as video and filmmakers. And I am still trying to find a kind of terminology to describe these performances. I mean, in a one-sentence brochure. But I've gotten to calling them a staged mediatic event, where really the technical designers and the actors work together as performers. As over the last 10 years, we've created 10 large-scale multimedia performances which have toured all over the world, and they all really have to do, in terms of content and form, with these negotiations around mediatization and identity. And through this lens, we've engaged with subjects as disparate as travel in Jet Lag, which is a project I'm going to talk about, outsourcing in Aladdin, and the data sphere in our latest production called Supervision. Each of these shows really uses technology to talk about technology and its impact on human presence. Sorry, show of hands, but no guilt. Did anybody here see Supervision at YBCA? Okay, good, just a few people. So I'm going to show some clips from it. And I also want to say that it's coming back to the West Coast. It's going to be at UC Davis in early December, and then also at Red Hat in LA right after that, so second chance. So, Supervision explores the changing nature of our relationship to living in a post-private society, where personal and electronic information is constantly collected and distributed. These data files collected on us circulate like extra bodies, and these data bodies carry stains that are harder to clean than mud or sin. From birth certificates to bad credit, every moment of your activity contributes to the construction of your own data body. And it's essential, as you know, to have a healthy, clean, hygienic data body in order to function, to register, to move and travel. So in this project, we started with trying to conjure up some very simple images of the data body. For instance, imagine a cloud of activity surrounding a banker as he buys his third house. Or imagine the rather anemic data body of an undocumented worker, just a name and a birthplace, since a lot of data can't be transported across borders. So that was the sort of basic premise with which we started the project. And each night we open the show with an analysis of that night's audience as a way to sort of bring to the foreground the data bodies that have followed the audience into the theater that night. We use one of the most popular consumer profiling companies, which is called Claritas. And basically their working formula can be summed up as what you buy plus where you live equals who you are. So I'm going to, here's our section, you are where you live. Let's see how accurate they are. Who, give me a zip code.
94708.
Okay, what neighborhood is that?
That's here.
Here.
Okay, so the most common segments are blue-blood estates, money and brains, movers and shakers, upper crust, and young Gujarati. I would say let's go with young Gujarati based on tonight's audience. So, young Gujarati are the nation's tech-savvy singles. Trendy apartments and condos, fitness clubs and clothing boutiques, casual restaurants, and all types of bars. So, but their lifestyle traits get a little broad. Shop at Banana Republic, order from J. Crew, Elle Decor Magazine, Independent Film Channel, that's interesting, that's new. And I'm sure you all drive Range Rovers, right? And then it breaks down into, I see, I need to go back and re-enter this. Okay. Sorry. Should we try one more zip code? Okay, 1 second. 94609? American Dreams, Bohemian Mix, Urban Achievers, Urban Elders, and more young Gujarati. Who do you want to investigate? Urban Elders. Eat fast food burgers. I mean, one of the interesting things about marketing and consumer profiling in general is that everything is couched as an aspiration, so that these, even people who are obviously economically struggling are sort of shown as being that is an accomplishment. Anyway, I think that this is just to show you that the way we start the show is by trying to give people a sense of their data bodies, but also point out that within these profiling corporations, obviously there's an assumed accuracy that is full of mistruths. And it shows the assumptions that are made into grouping bodies of data based on consumer activity alone. So supervision tells 3 stories, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time just telling you briefly the stories so that you can get a sense of how it plays out in the video. The first story, as soon as you start talking about data valence, people immediately think about identity theft. That's the most obvious association, right? But I think that what's lesser known is that one of the fastest growing forms of identity theft in this country is family on family, meaning that there are parents who are stealing, or older relatives stealing young kids' identities and manipulating these social security numbers and addresses essentially so that they're able to open credit lines and et cetera, et cetera. It's a crime which is massively underreported because young victims don't yet know to monitor their credit reports, but there are thousands of 8-year-olds walking around in like $500,000 of debt. That'll come to light over the next few years as they apply for credit cards. It's very rich material because it borrows from the classic abuse scenario. Many of the same terms that are used, recovery, victims, abuse, survivors, etc. I haven't heard anyone use the word data molestation yet, but I'm sure it's out there. So in this story, the father refrains from exploiting his own data. In fact, he's a little obsessive compulsive about his own data hygiene. We see him checking and rechecking his own credit history to confirm that his data body is still clean. Oh, I see what I'm doing, sorry. Meanwhile, the son's data body bulks up on increasing credit lines, etc. So, I'll play a little bit of this. This is the beginning of the show.
What's that?
Oh, you know, people count all the birds in their region.
Wait, how do you know you're not counting the same bird twice?
Oh, funny.
Hello? John Fletcher? No, there's no one here with that name. Well, I'm afraid your records must be incorrect. The fact is I haven't had this number very long. No, I can't do that. You have to excuse me. Come on, sweetie. People always told me that fate is something you just can't control. Well, I never bought that. Fate can be redesigned. It just takes know-how. You're a part of this, sweetie. You're my good boy. In the beginning, I thought of you as my twin. John Sr., John Jr. My twin was in here alone with me. Never complained, just grew. You were taking your first steps, losing your first tooth. We grew you one keystroke at a time. Now you're 31 and I've got you in Seattle. You're getting real advantages and experience beyond your years. I want you to understand my methods. We have to make every second add up to something while it matters, while you're young, while we're all together. Now, remember this. You're the front man, but I'm the fall guy. That means that if anyone has to take a hit, it'll be me, and I'll get it all to come out right for you. That'll be my sacrifice. I'm doing this for you, sweetie.
Okay. It's interesting. It's always problematic to show this work because of what I just talked about liveness and the sense of layering within these performances is very much about the interplay between the live performer being mediated on these different levels. And so then to see it kind of compressed on a video level is like, I don't know if you guys are getting anything out of this. I hope so. So I'm going to talk a little bit. The second story in Supervision is about a traveler. As he crosses successive borders, this solitary traveler gradually reveals more and more of his information until his identity becomes transparent, with no part of his life left outside the bounds of data valence. The story of the traveler obviously points to the moment we're currently experiencing in terms of the crossover between different fields, different databases of information. Above and beyond CAPS2, the combining, which was the simple act of combining our governmental and our commercial profiles, there's much more complex merging going on right now. And in this parable, the traveler's data body combines his databases across medical, national, economic lines. So I'm going to show you a section from...
Hello, yes, Joey.
Oops.
All right, so it looks like screen 3 is open. Can you step behind it, put your feet 18 inches apart, put your arms by your side?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. All right, it looks like your Paxil dosage is an increase. Why is that?
I don't know. I'm just following the doctor's orders.
Yes, Dr. Zadie. He sent in your recent HIV results. Oh, how's your niece? Is she feeling better?
My niece is fine and she's back home now.
Okay. Let me see. Are you traveling alone?
Yes.
Then why did you order a king-size bed for your hotel room?
I ordered a king-size bed because I have sciatica.
Ooh, sciatica. And your cholesterol's really gone up.
What?
Your cholesterol, it's jumped a bit since the last...
I didn't know that. Actually, I've been waiting for those results.
Okay, sir. Have you been around anybody that might have been carrying that bird flu?
No one with avian flu.
Because I see you're traveling a lot now between St. Lucette and Marrakesh and Entebbe.
Yes, I do this. Those are simply territories I'm repping for my company. It's North Africa.
Oh, North Africa. So you're not working out of Dubuque anymore?
I have never worked in Dubuque. I would like that taken off my record.
You're requesting a change in your record?
No, I didn't.
That's good. Hold on, I gotta...
You probably observed in that last sequence, the performers are not looking at each other, right? There's one performer who's down in front of the stage performing to the wall, essentially, but his camera image is projected quite large on the other side of the stage. So there's kind of a network that the performance is staged within. The last story is about a young woman in New York who is tending to her failing grandmother in Sri Lanka. And she digitally archives her grandmother's past in an attempt to jog her grandmother's memory. They also communicate via webcam, so you'll see a little bit more of that. And at the end of the sequence, you'll see, this is the end of their story, the grandmother's memory fades and she slips away. And the granddaughter is left to discover what lives on inside and outside her grandmother's data. So just so you see what I was talking about, the grandmother, this character is seated in front of the stage, right, looking into a small webcam, and her image is projected quite large over here. There are technicians sitting all in front of the stage who are manipulating her image, so you see them and the software and the larger image. Then the performer, who's sort of elevated slightly, is standing behind that screen. She moves back and forth and communicates with her grandmother on her webcam.
Are you there? Yeah. Oh, listen. I think I found a husband for you. Oh, God. Yes, look. This fellow Moby. Do you know him? He lives in New York, too. He doesn't eat any animals, but I do. Well, I think it can still work. Oh, darling, 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 when are you coming over? I'm not coming, Grandma. I'm in New York. Has anyone been there today? Oh, yes, yes. People are here. Oh, many people are here. But Michael was here. Who's Michael? Oh, Michael, he is such a nice, quiet boy. He never says much. Oh, he is here now. Hello, Michael. Hello, darling. Michael's here. Oh, all right. There's nobody there. Well, now he is gone. Who's this Michael? Oh, he comes every day. He lives next door. There's no Michael next door. Bloody bitch. What? Darling, when are you coming? I'm not coming, Grandma. I have a lot of work to do. I'm sorry. Epiti suam. What? Vaya podada. Grandma, you know I don't speak Tamil. Here, do you see this picture? You always loved this photo. Oh yes. You know, that is such a beautiful sari. We bought it for a birthday present. You look so lovely, darling. That's not me.
Which was called Aladdin. I have to say, I think somebody should do a study about how many artists and scholars have studied Bangalore since, about 2000. But I'd like to point out that I started this project in 1998. So, Basically, Aladdin starts with the cyber immigrants of Bangalore. Bangalore, as I'm sure most of you know, is the Silicon Valley of southern India. And the term cyber immigration really came to being there in terms of the electronic global market that replaces the idea of the physical immigrant. So through the comparatively simple technology of fiber optic phone lines, we turned another continent into our back office. And these operators in India were, at this time in the early 2000s, trained to pass as Americans and basically weren't allowed to say where they were. So they developed these very elaborate names and lifestyles that had to do with this character that they created and that they would enact on the other end of the phone lines, working at night, which was during our daytime. So there's a lot of cultural masking and cultural grafting that was brought on through this technology, and also kind of cultural schizophrenia, which is actually an operative term in Bangalore. There's a booming psychotherapy trade there, which really has to do with these young, college-age operators spending 12 hours a day doing things like giving directions to LAX, talking to people who are going to fly into an airport, rent a car, and fly out the same day, things that most Indians in India are probably not going to do in their lifetime. And so I went to Bangalore and did a lot of research, went through the training program where they basically learned to become Americans. And we also interviewed the trainers and the students. This was a collaboration between my company and Modi Rodi, which is a fantastic South Asian company based in London. And the reason we started with, actually not with Bangalore, but with Aladdin. We were looking at 1001 Nights as a kind of container for the idea of cross-cultural collaboration. 1001 Nights is really a vehicle that's traveled from Persia to Disney over the last 2,000 years, and is very much about cultures borrowing and stealing and telling and retelling the same stories over and over again in their own idiom. So we took the story of Aladdin, which contains these still very contemporary themes of instantaneous wish fulfillment and conspicuous consumption, and the fantasy of personal transformation, and sort of merge that with the material from Bangalore. This project was really kind of a cross-platform work. There was a website which I thought was just totally hokey, because we set up a thing where you could make a wish to the worldwide genie, and we got tens of thousands of hits. So obviously people felt very strongly about that. And then we made a music video with music by Shri, who's a celebrated DJ in London, which I played here, which was played on MTV Asia, and then this performance, which traveled all over the world. So I'll play a bit of this, yeah.
Here by the company, let me say you something. In the beginning, when I had to learn the accent, the only thing on my mind was to get the accent, come what may, however. So I tried my best to keep the accent, even with my friends, my family members, strangers, and it was a hell. But then now after working for so many months, we've mastered an art where we can switch the accent on when required and switch it off. Okay, for example, if I'm talking to you like this now, this is without an accent. Okay, this is just a normal accent. I'm talking to you. This is a primary Indian accent which I'm talking to you. But if I spoke to you in an American accent, that would be like, this is me talking to you, Alan Travis speaking to you, and this is with an accent. And you hear it all different pronunciations, and the diction, everything is totally different. So this is the change that we have learned to switch it on, switch it off.
Okay, guys, you've been working on Ali.
This is true that they use television programs to study America as representations of what Americans are. So these shows that he names are actually the shows that they study, and which is a beautiful example of sort of mediatized reception of culture.
Deal, right? Boston, and Frasier, which is Seattle, right? And Buffy, right? Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That's California. Okay. Next, Tanya's going to talk to you about New York and her latest project that she's been working on. Tanya.
I'm going to talk to you about Friends, which is the most popular show in America. Now there are 6 friends, but I'm only going to talk about 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the first one is Joey. Now Joey is a very handsome fellow, but he's a bit of an idiot. hair and dark eyes, and she doesn't have much personality, so I don't know what else to say about her. Then there is Chandler. Now, Chandler is also a very handsome fellow, but he keeps getting fat and thin and fat and thin. And they say that he has a drug problem. In fact, he's been in rehabilitation centers many times. Then there is Phoebe. Now, Phoebe is like the dumb blonde in the group, but in real life, she's very smart. In fact, she's a genius and a member of Mensa, and she's married to a Frenchman. Then there is Rachel. Now, Rachel is like the prettiest of the group. In America, all the girls cut their hair like her. Her name is Jennifer Aniston, and she's married to the most handsome man, Brad Pitt, whose name is Brad Pitt, who's like a total hunk. So those are friends 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, not bad, not bad. Now, did anyone experience that she was a little rushed? Right? I'm sure that there was some element of nervousness there, okay? Remember something. You're going to be talking to people on the phone 10 hours a day. They have to understand what you're saying, right? They're going to be asking you questions and giving you information. Keep a certain intonation in your voice, right? A certain inflection. Most importantly, keep their attention.
And be sure to keep it always consistent. Happy intonation. On the road customer guidance, this is Phoebe. How may I help you?
Yes, hi. I just rented a car from you guys, and I'm trying to get from LA to LE, and I was just wondering if you could give me some directions.
You're trying.
Okay, so just quickly to describe this long space down here is where the performers and the operators are located. Each of them have a webcam on their desk, which is manipulating their images. I mean, their images are taken by the video operators who are on either side of the stage, and it's represented up above. And then as the performers switch to Americans, they step into these LCD booths. So they're basically doing a series of vocal impersonations through the show. This woman is trying to get from Los Angeles to Las Vegas.
I get to Louisiana, man. So, I'm in Los Angeles, I'm trying to get to Las Vegas, and I lost the who's it was? The thingamajiggy with all the directions on it that you guys gave me. I'm just gonna tell you, I just won a gazillion smackaroonies in the lottery, and I'm gonna bet the whole lot.
I think there's something wrong with the connection. Can you hold on a moment, please?
Yeah, sure.
Here? What is a smackaroonie?
Pasta.
Spaghetti. No, smackaroonie, not macaroni.
So then she Googles macaroni, which is happening on that middle window.
Hello, ma'am, I'm back again.
Yeah, hi, look, I'm just utterly confused as to where I'm going. I'm feeling a little lost in space out here, to tell you the truth. And
Lost in Space? That was a great show.
Yeah.
Do you remember Angela Cartwright?
Yes.
She was the daughter on Lost in Space.
Wow, that's great. Have you got my directions?
I'm pulling them up, ma'am. The computers are quite slow today.
Okay.
Angela Cartwright. You know, I always used to sing along with her.
You're so sweet. Where are you from?
I'm from the Global Calling Center, ma'am.
No, but where is that?
Oh, here, I have your directions.
Oh,
If you follow this street, the 15, in Los Angeles, and you take it all the way to 15, you're going to hit this desert.
Okay.
Now, you can't miss it because there's nothing else there.
Okay.
And if you go all the way through this desert, at the end of it is Las Vegas.
Okay, 15 to Vegas.
That's right. Thanks for calling on the road and have a nice day.
I'll just show you one more scene from this show. So we were beta testing this technology, this software that I saw at IBM called Dynavision. So like it's so sci-fi 1950s, but in fact they had developed it as a security device. It's motion sensitive, basically. So a security guard can view a bank of cameras, and if something moves, then the image is activated. So in this context, we had Dynavision running in both of the video banks, and the performers learned to very sensitively activate the masks. We essentially used it as a kind of literalization of the idea of cultural masking. So you'll see Rizvan here, working with Dynavision.
You shake that monkey off your neck, right? So just give me your address and I'll send you out that welcome package. All right? Thanks. All right. And your city? Chicago. Chicago? Hey, great city, my kind of town, The cubs, the bears, the bulls, Oprah, me. So I live in New York. Yeah, I got a great place over on, Central Park West. Right. Listen, I'm really sorry. Could you please just hold on one more moment? Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Hello? Come on in. Come on in.
I'm gonna, I think, do one more show real quick, about 5 minutes, okay. So, working backwards, the project that we did before Aladdin, this was a very interesting show to tour because we try to do a lot of outreach wherever we are, and post-performance discussions, of course, but also workshops. And to do a project about outsourcing, particularly at the turn of the millennia, was really an extraordinary experience. When we were in Bogota, Singapore, India, there was a lot of very generative discussion around this project, and it was a really rewarding experience to kind of video and the material. So the last project I'm going to show you is something that we did with Dylan Scafidio, which Shannon mentioned, the architects and media artists who are rebuilding Lincoln Center at the moment. Oh no, now we have to close the door. Okay. And basically, Jet Lag is based on these two true stories about travel, thinking about two people whose lives were really enmeshed in and transformed by contemporary technologies and contemporary travel. So the first story is about a sailor, Donald Crowhurst, who joined a round-the-world sailing race in 1969 that was being sponsored by the London Sunday Times. He got out into the middle of the Atlantic and realized he wasn't going to make it. He wasn't really a professional sailor. His self-designed boat was falling apart all around him. But rather than returning home to Portishead, he sailed in tiny circles off the coast of South America and sent radio signals back to England indicating that he was making his way around the world. And they believed him. So he basically stayed outside of shipping lanes and outside of human contact for 3 months, except for these radio reports that he would send in. And he became kind of a hero in the press. They reported these incredible travel times that he had reported to them, and he essentially made this virtual journey within the space of the British press. So one of the way that we really started this project was I did a lot of dramaturgical research and found the BBC had given Crowhurst a camera and a reel-to-reel tape deck to have on board to record this heroic journey. So we got the tapes. And they're really quite an extraordinary, very early example of seeing someone generate this image of themselves for the media, the heroic sailor. So there's a lot of this at first, thumbs up and singing sea shanties, and you see him recording and re-recording various segments, trying to get it right, get the heroic image spot on. But then eventually he devolved into something that sailors call time madness, which is, you kind of lose track of space and time because the horizon line is always constant. So at the end, he threw himself off his boat and presumably drowned. But the tapes remained as this incredible, testimony to his journey. So one thing that's really key here is that the sailor, Jeff Webster, plays really only with the camera. That is the character on stage that is with him. So the other performers are down, yet again, at this long, low table in front of the stage. But he is isolated from them in terms of lag, an oral lag on his microphone, and also physically within the stage.
Good morning. Maybe. Good morning. Good morning. I've been at sea for 3 days, more or less. I'd like to begin by thanking Channel 8 for their support, their interest in me. I would also like to add that by the time anybody gets to view these tapes, I may very well have won the Sunday Times race, so you'll be listening to me with a certain heightened interest. Of course, if something were to happen, I don't really want to think about that, but then, of course, you'll be listening to me in a completely different graver frame of mind. I know that. I'm completely aware of this possibility.
There are a lot of things wrong with the book, Grace.
I miss you.
The way the snails are cut. I miss you too, Grace. The mass and buoyancy and heat release mechanism, they're not working. In fact, they've never worked. Screws keep coming out of the hands for self-steering. By the way, Grace, are you absolutely certain that you don't build the pumps? Because I can't seem to find them. If they're not on board, well, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. No?
The wind's picking up, friendly to the 40s, no doubt. Reminds me of that poem. See, how does that go? And then the storm blast came, and he was tyrannous and strong, and no, I forget something. The ship drove fast, loud roared the blast, and southward I will. This should be like the big waves. Do you have like a stormy sea you can put in? Dramatic water, that's it.
So then he prepares himself for the retake of the scene.
Tuesday, December 25th, 0800 hours. Merry Christmas to all from this lonely sailor about to enter the fearsome weather of the 40s.
Our intention is to achieve that. So the second story is also a true story about a grandmother who in 1970 flew with her young grandson from New York to Amsterdam. Then they flew Amsterdam, New York, Amsterdam, Amsterdam, New York, and they flew 167 times consecutively without stopping until she died of jet lag. I'm sure we can all relate to. And we actually found the story in a citation from Paul Virilio, who didn't name her correctly, so it was impossible to find, but he referred to her as a contemporary heroine who lives in deferred time, which I think was a beautiful way of putting it. So in this version of their story, there's essentially kind of metronomic. It's not really a story. There's no progression. They go back and forth, and you see them go through these rituals of domestication that you wouldn't go through in this, hygienic, monocultural, antiseptic space at the airport. So I'll just play this.
Talking to you is like talking to a wall. Just like your father when he was your age. He didn't listen to me either. He didn't listen to me then, and he doesn't listen to me now. He didn't listen, and he didn't speak much. And look at him now. He can't stop talking, and he's got nothing to say.
We shot this in the Brussels airport when we all had terrible jet lag.
Some coffee? I already had some. You already had some? You want to sleep?
Basically, the grandson has been playing this flight simulation game through the entire show, and in the end they fly off into the space of this cyber game. So Jet Lag, which we are going to try to restage, although probably not work because airport culture has changed so much, is really about two people who've used technology to escape, as I said, these normative ideas of time and space. And it was very much a meditation on the erasure of geography that's brought on by contemporary travel and the collapsing of physical space into this mediated space. So I think that I will stop there. I think you can see that a shared impulse in all of these performances is really to stage the network. The performers are often isolated physically, but always connected electronically. And so the audience is invited to observe, the audience is really invited to observe the network that mediates these actors. I think a very simple example of this is, as I mentioned, none of the performers really ever look at each other. For instance, in supervision, the traveler and the border agent are facing entirely different directions, but their eye lines are connected in a larger stage picture. Or for instance, Jeff Webster, the sailor in Jet Lag, acting with the camera. They're in very isolated worlds, surrounded by, sometimes immersed in and contending with technology. But you also see in this stage picture the technicians and their devices filling the stage picture and enacting the story. Stories that critically and, I hope, somewhat visually examine the nuanced ongoing relationship between us as performers and the instruments which surround us.